Well.
You went out there too?
Yeah.
Come on now,
She
swear.
drove out there, yeah.
Now.
She came from, she was on the on-ramp.
She was out there helping. She wanted to do it. We're not allowed to say.
Sneaky. Yeah. Now can I get on the road, on the internet? No, it's not letting me on the network still.
We don't need them.
Oh, maybe it's gonna go to Oh, all right.
Does that make people feel good?
How soon we forget.
No,
It's set up differently.
they reset things. Believe me, but yes, how soon I have forgotten, yes. And also, I have not kept up with today's technology.
And why would you?
Oh, no kidding. I'm going back.
Or how could you?
I'm gonna go home and just live my little old life.
Like I always say, you guys like my camera? I also make phone calls with it. Sure. Yeah. No.
Well, we can make a judgment based on value proposition. We have his documents from YE and state contract for the buses. We know this price is $400 or $500 cheaper than anything else on the market.
I don't think the auditor would see it that way. When they come back, how do you know that? Just because it's. Hey, you made it down from the north.
From the north.
So the auditor.
I'm looking forward to the trip back to the
How do you know
north.
that?
What was the road like?
That snow is dancing on you.
We know it's a price because
They don't crash and go crazy.
Or
both. How's Mark doing?
How's it going, Bob?
Good.
Good.
Looking for a wonderful, challenging trip to get home.
Kind of slow going.
I don't know your challenge on that or your stupidity, but here I am.
So what do you want about the auditor?
Yeah, it's one of those days, there's just no contrast. Like roadway.
That's what's bad. It is dancing.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Today's prices.
Trying to figure out how to meet with their daughter and family up in Winthrop. We used to do this. Sure. I used to do presents up. And I would have done it last weekend, but they were busy. So she called last night. She said, we're not going to do it tomorrow. We're going to watch it on Wednesday. Her issue was giving us the house. I told her, I said, no, I don't want to go I can get home. I have no idea. She does her weather. I'm not going to forecast it for Thursday, Friday.
If it warmed up to 30 and starts snowing, it's gonna be a mess.
Yeah.
15 or 20 like this, just dancing.
Yeah.
That last shot we got was like.
Yeah.
Well, they're
It's just,
it's
fine when you don't have to shovel, you can take blow it out. But it's cold.
It was real chill factor flying thing this was.
Yeah. And up in the winter, minus 40. Honestly, minus 20, minus 25, but then the wind chill. So we talked about, you know, I want to be driving.
That's how
I can't get out.
Yeah.
Good.
play it online.
It'd be challenging.
Yeah, well, just go slow.
Bob is here.
I just think it was. So, as they're set right to the
It was done by a committee of 25.
Oh, sorry, I was talking, okay.
Go right over.
Wonder why.
Let me count the waves.
Yes.
Oh, that's a different one.
Yeah, there's for hot microphones.
There you go.
Be careful.
These are hotter than normal too.
You know, it's a shine.
Seriously.
We got Miss Joyce is on.
Oh, Laura, you're there. A little bit.
She came to make sure that we could get zoomed in.
This makes sense to you.
Hello, Laura.
You told me one
How are
thing.
you?
Hello, Maria.
Hi.
Something for change.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Mark it on the wall.
6.
Well, look at 21 to 22, so I'll show you 20 and 21.
Well, it says it at the top. I knew what it was. I just pointed it out.
Yep.
And I don't see Kyle Steinberg. And I don't see Kyle Steinberg.
Go ahead. I pointed out the fact I was here. at the
Mark,
meeting,
do you
so-
know Kyle was gonna come in?
I do not know.
Oh, you will be.
Greg,
Okay.
Rob forgot. Rob? Whoa.
So, Ann, did you come from Leavenworth?
I worked on an inch today, just so that I could be here in person. I get to go home and do a lot of snow blowing tonight.
Just to get into your driveway.
Just to get into my driveway, yes.
Yeah.
I'll park on the road for a little while, to shovel out a little tunnel.
I thought we were supposed
Do the snow or leaf
I was
blower.
just checking.
What is that?
What's that?
We can use a leaf blower.
That's
and fly it.
people
That snow is so
joining
light
here.
and fluffy.
It's light everywhere because it's so cold out, but we just get so much in Leavenworth.
Yeah.
So,
Didn't tell the city.
what's that?
Tell the city what?
Definitely got a form, so whenever.
They don't do mine either.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5 here. 9 here. 6, 7, 8.
I'll be back there.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. I am playing the part of Ron Tidd this afternoon. I am an actor. So we do have a quorum, it sounds like, Maria, thank you.
Yes.
All right, thanks for braving the elements, and for those of you online, I'm glad you're safe and well. You're missing out. With that, now's the time for public comment. Do we have anybody in the public online or in chambers that would wish to give public testimony today, or public comment, sorry? Do you have anybody online, Maria, that we don't? Okay, very good. Hearing none, we'll move on with our consent agenda. Would seek a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented, which includes the minutes of the November 15th, 2022 board meeting, minutes of the November 23rd, 2nd, 2022 special meeting and the accounts payable and payroll vouchers from November 2022.
Move to approve. Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. To our next bit of business, employee recognition, high five awards. Ed.
Get the right one out here because there's only one guy out here that was here for this. So if y'all remember, November 22nd was our last special board meeting. On that day, there was a pretty good snowstorm going on, and the following employees each grabbed a bucket of sand and walked from Link's ops base to the on-ramp of the Otabashan Bridge because there was a semi-truck, a Link bus, and 2 vehicles stopping traffic out there in Old Station on the on-ramp to the Otabashan Bridge. So we wanted to recognize these 5 employees that walked from ops with buckets of sand over there to get all these vehicles freed up and get traffic moving because there was no other way to get there. You couldn't drive. So Jake Austin, an ops supervisor, Sean Larson, who's in the back. Got a little gift certificate for you. Jeff Bolero, maintenance instructor, Raven Johnson, a maintenance technician, and Humberto Espinosa, also a maintenance technician. They just took it upon themselves to walk over instead of try and drive. Did a great job and got everybody moving again. I want to acknowledge them.
We emphasize most people have no responsibility for facilities, but that's just been part of the culture of the organization that if something needs to be done, people jump in and do it. So again, my hearty congratulations as well. I was impressed by what I saw.
Maybe we should get a 4-wheel drive.
You can hold sand minutes. So you know where the back entrance of Link is? It took 15 minutes to go from the back entrance to the front entrance that day, just sitting there.
Yeah.
It was bad.
And that was a bad morning. Once again, thank you. That I think that got some recognition in our local media, which is great. It's good to demonstrate that it's a team effort at Link. I know that I heard a lot of positive comments in the community. With that, board member recognition, Richard?
Well, since Rob's on his way, let's wait.
Yeah, let's wait for that. Okay. All right. Forming a committee to work with Prothman Executive Recruitment Group. We want to have that discussion now, or shall we wait on that?
I think we can go ahead and do it now. So Prothman will be starting the recruitment process here in January, and we'd like to get a committee of board members to essentially advise them on what you've told me, what you're looking for essentially in a position, and then to kind of watch the process, make sure they are identifying candidates that actually are in the category, you know, sort of what you're looking for, so that they're not going down a path that brings people that you're not interested in looking at. I think that's really the key part here, is make sure they have what they need so they can do a better job for you.
So are we looking at something that would be beyond the executive committee? Or is that?
It could be designating the executive committee, since it's been 21 years since we've recruited for the CEO. We don't have any process to essentially set up. So, you know, it could be the executive committee, it could be a standalone committee. I just thought the board should be engaged explicitly, and however you choose to do it would be okay with us. It's just, we need to let them know who they should be talking to. I don't think the whole board's quite too big to do this group.
So as incoming, presumably as incoming chair, I'd be looking to the board for suggestions. What do you feel is best? I believe that a smaller group is best, keeping it more nimble and then reporting back to the full board, but that's just my opinion.
I agree.
And I'll remind us again.
Executive chair, vice chair, and I believe immediate past chair.
Yeah. Well, I would think that that'd be fine. And then when within that group, if you felt you needed additional you know, at some point, you could either do it an ad hoc or a formal appointment.
Sure. Yeah. Does anybody else feel?
I would have been too far out. I don't want to drive down to that. And I dealt with both problems, so I have all the confidence in them.
We'll do it if you wanted to.
Okay. And any strong feelings one way or the other?
No, I think that sounds like a good plan.
Okay. Joyce, Bob, Bill.
Sounds good to me to use the executive committee.
Okay.
I agree.
Okay, Jim, you okay? Okay, perfect. Right, sounds like everybody feels like-minded, so we'll move forward with that plan. Richard, General Manager's report.
Okay, I'm going to do a couple things here on the sheriff. For those of you online, can you see this now?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. So we had committed that quarterly we were going to report on where we are in terms of carrying out the voter initiative, you know, sort of where we are with our Vision 2020. This is our scorecard that we have for it. Unfortunately, we've gone backwards a little bit on some of the areas where we had to cut some service to match staff availability. We are about 50% done with what's out here. More on the capital side, less on the operations because of the staff shortages. So there's a few more yellow and red than there were the last time we looked at it because we had to go backwards on a couple of places. But practically speaking, I mean, I think we're making the progress we can make at the time. And I think we're a little ahead on some of the capital because we've been able to put some resources there because we haven't had the staff on the backside. So we should be further along at this point. I mean, based on what we told the voters, but I think the real reasons we're there are because of the economy, the way it's been and ability to move. So that's that. I don't have much more to say about it. I will have this sent to you so you can look at it in detail. There's a lot of detail in it, but it's just slightly different from what it was last time. Okay, any questions?
Thank you, Richard. So you can send that out.
Yeah, we'll get that sent out. Okay, then let me take you through the operations. Okay, so for our system, our fixed route weekday ridership was down 11.3% from October. And I think if you look at the details of it, the snow event at the end of the month really hit ridership after the holidays as well. So that's a little bit more than we would expect. We expect it to fall in November. It typically does from October, but that was a bit more than I thought. We were up 3.5% from last year, up 18.3% from the pandemic period, but we're down 28.9% from pre-pandemic era. Fixed route Saturday was down 13.3% from October. So similar to what we saw on weekdays, up 4.6% from last year, up 11.5% from the pandemic year, and up 0.5% from pre-pandemic. So this is where we've been able to retain services on Saturday and Sunday, and we're seeing that in ridership. Sunday, we were down 13.5% from October, up 30% from last year, and up 48.7% from 2020. We didn't operate pre-pandemic, so you're showing the ridership is developing well. On our DART service, this is our demand response system we operate in Chelan and Leavenworth. We're up 3.5% from October, up 52.6% from last year, and it is just booming in Chelan. Up 183% from the pandemic year and up 180% from pre-pandemic. So that model whatever reason, finally caught in the Chelan Valley and has been doing quite well. And we're starting to see similar results in Leavenworth as we've made some tweaks to the system there. In fact, we're at a point, I think in the Chelan area, that if we had the staff, we'd have to add a second vehicle up there because people are just busy. They just don't have any spare space to carry people. So, and that so why that's important was we started the DART operation in Chelan as an experiment. That's same day, so you can call for a ride on that same day. So it's sort of like a public Uber is the way it operates. As a model for service in the foothills and service in the low density areas of our service area, and wanted to see, could we get productivity on it that brought the cost down to what our fixed route costs are. We're about the same in Chelan right now. So that's a positive. That may be unique. I mean, that's been one of the real questions in these types of models is because you have a phone call or reservation involved, your reservation agent as well as a driver, you have twice the labor that you do in running a fixed route bus. So getting the costs to be similar, you have to have pretty decent productivity even in a small vehicle. So it's where a lot of the industry is moving as a way to serve low density areas. The experiment is, I think, has been pretty positive for us. I think we are actively looking at this as a solution for some of the foothill areas rather than trying to run maybe fixed route every place. But time we have to keep watching it. Then, oops, on-time performance continues to be struggled. We're down 3.5% from our October performance, down 8.2% from last year, and down 12.4% from the pandemic period. And as I've said, this is really a traffic issue. We're having just enormous traffic issues here in town that are really impacting the ability to get buses out on time. Festivals in Leavenworth, actually getting out of Wenatchee is almost as bad as the impact at the other end, but those things compound to the system. Yeah.
So this is Lynn, everybody. She is not here. She's out of town. So Lynn, are you there? Yeah. Oh, she turned it off. She's just supposed to mute it.
Okay. Okay. So that's, I'm not sure there's much we can do about the traffic issues except recognize that's part of reality. Didn't have any accidents well, no accidents that were preventable or were at class 1 level. There were a whole lot of mirror strikes. I have never seen a situation where we've been hit as much as we've been hit in the last couple of months. I get notified every time there's an accident. I've never had situations where I'm getting notified 4 or 5 times a week, which is which is happening the last couple of months, and the vast majority of people running into us. I mean, our numbers are higher than they should be, and they're higher than they were last year a lot, but everybody else has just gone crazy. I think it connects to the traffic issues, but we've been having a lot of hits and damage. And because we can't get parts and we can't get into the body shop, maintenance is having to do the repairs themselves. And unfortunately, we have someone who knows how to do that, and we had enough of a paint booth to make it happen. So we've been doing a lot of repairs. Complaints, we were down 0.7% from October, up 100% from last year. And we had a bit of time change issues with complaints because probably the biggest one we saw in November was driver passed me by. And in the rural areas where there's no lights, people aren't as aware to get out to get themselves known that they can be seen. The drivers can't see when it starts getting dark, and that typically happens this time of year as we start seeing some of that. Once you get passed by, either you stop riding or you learn to wave your arms. So, Paratrans and weekday boardings, we were down 7.3% from October, up 13.3% from last year, up 57% from the pandemic, and up 7.8% from pre-pandemic period. I think the down, again, was just the weather at the end of the month there. That was the issues. And the fact that we're only up 7% with the expansion we've had of the hours on paratransit, I think means that's working the way that we had hoped. We were worried that could explode in my opinion, because when you go more places on your fixed route, you have to match it for your paratransit. And so we both had to operate paratransit later in the evening or later in the morning. And it hasn't been generating as much as it could have. So I think that's actually a good thing in this case. Saturdays, we were up 5.4% from October, up 27% from last year, up 148% from the pandemic year, up 40.6% from pre-pandemic. And here we added a lot more service. And so we expected to see paratransit come up because we only operated about half of the Saturday we do now currently. And so that is sort of tracking. I think it's what we expected. Sunday, we were down 21.2% from October, up 7.9% from last year, and up 46.4% from the pandemic year. We didn't operate pre-pandemic Sundays, so this is all new ridership. Hours. So hours per weekday, we were down 0.7% from October, down 7.1% from last year, down 1.2% from our pandemic year, and down 3.9% from pre-pandemic. So weekday service is actually less today than it was before the pandemic. So this is where most of our cuts have taken place. In fact, where we have our biggest hole, we have to backfill. Saturday service hours. We were even with October, down 7% from last year, up 14.7% from the pandemic year, and up 32.9% from pre-pandemic. Again, we expanded service. Ridership on paratransit up 40%. It's about the same on fixed routes. So that's where those hours are going. Hey, Rob. And then on Sunday, we are even with October, up 17% from last year, up 63.4% from our pandemic year. Again, we're getting a return on that investment of hours. But we're actually operating fewer hours in total than we were previously. Okay. Miles being road calls, we were at 18,577 in November, a little better than it was in October, but still down from where we were the previous year. Nothing that's out of the ballpark in that range, and it will vary month to month depending on what's hitting. And I think we had some warranty stuff that you did, if I remember right. Is that correct?
Something like that. Something.
Cost per service hour was very high at $186.22, and that's because there are some non-service operating costs that show up because they're not capitalized. Things like the engineering cost for the pedestrian bridge study is included, and that bill came due this month. And then we had a similar bill. What was the other one, Nick?
You had the sidewalk repairs.
Oh, sidewalk repairs up front. We hit the bills, and then there was a third one I forgot.
Roof repairs. There were several repairs that were put into the operating that were actually budgeted in capital, but you can't capitalize them because they're not assets.
And so it's kind of in fact, if you take them out, we end up being about where we should be on the numbers. But according to the auditor, they're not assets, so you can't capitalize them, so they show up in the operating budget. And because we're doing more capital and there's more of those types of costs, that is kind of driving those numbers. And it's an interesting dynamic. It's not really what's happening with the operation, it's happening with some of the capital projects we're doing.
Do we put a footnote into those so that just we don't lose sight of that as we're tracking this year?
Well, I think we're going to need to do that because I think this is becoming a bigger issue year to year, and the auditors gotten tighter about what we can capitalize and not capitalize. They challenge us on
project like the South Manatee connector, that's city or counties project. There's nothing to do with us. We just built the road to help our service out. Same thing with the roundabout, same thing with the bus pullouts on the highways. There's no asset to capitalize. So we do put a note in our notes, financial notes, saying these projects were capital items that we participated in, but we can't capitalize because they're not ours. And we'll have a list of how much they are. So,
I think that's because I definitely don't want to lose that, because if not, you're not tracking the same thing year to year, and that kind of blows that. So we've talked about this. I don't think we've got it entirely figured out how we want to track it on scorecards or totaling the financials, but as Nick said, we're making notes, so we're trying to keep it clear, but that's what's driving that.
makes sense.
That's scorecards. Okay. I think I'm just about. Oh, I was going to mention one other thing that actually was on the local news last night. Interesting statistic, very interesting statistic for us. The Bureau of Economic Statistics had updated its cost of living index, which is the relationship between wages, housing, and those elements. And Wenatchee has moved from 330th position in affordability to 36th. We're now one of the 36th most expensive urban area in the United States to live.
That's a good thing, right?
Yeah. So, puts us on par with a whole lot of cities over 1 million people, and housing being the real big part of that. I think we're all feeling it, but it was interesting to see that move as much as it did, because that was a sort of surprising outcome.
Thank you, Richard. Do we want to go back to the board member recognition?
Yes, I think we do. All right. So we have two. First is for you.
First off, I got to apologize. My wife is sick, and we have a foreign exchange student living with us this week, and we've never had a teenager in our house before, and so I completely spaced on this, so I apologize.
So Rob wanted to thank you for your role as chair, and on behalf of staff and hope the board, we would like to recognize your year as chair of the board. Very much.
Thank you. Is that the only recognition, or do we have another?
We have one more.
Wonderful. More, but he's
online, so I'll just. So we also wanted to recognize Commissioner Bob Boogert, who will be stepping off the board, and we have little crystal. So commemorating your leadership and service to Link Transit, January 2021 through December 2022. Thank you for your service on the board, and a little making a difference keychain that we put together.
Well, thank you, Richard.
Recognize that.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's go to our next item. It's the report on the Busco research trip. I believe that's next. Nick,
yes.
Did you want to?
Oh, no, I thought it was me. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay. All right.
So maybe the best way to start is to have the two of you, since that was part of the goal, was to have the board engaged in the conversation and give us your thoughts, and I'll fill in where I think necessary.
Would you like to start?
Sure.
Okay.
So yeah, we traveled to Deurne, Netherlands, to the Ebusco plant, and I got to say my overall impressions of the operation were extremely positive. Everything from the detail, attention to detail, to just it was a real tangible feeling of pride in the product that they produce. It was very visible, very tangible, very palpable. And in taking a look at the production, we first of all, we ended up or started with a meeting with the president of Ebusco and some of his staff. And then we had a tour of the plant itself. Very impressive plant for a company that is essentially 10 years old. Everything from just what struck me was how clean and just very organized the production process was. In terms of the production itself, the buses that we were there to look at, the 3.0 models, are a composite construction. So, and then you have the carbon fiber beams, and which are extremely strong, and the entire bus itself is about 27% lighter. So as a result of that, you get, in combination with the battery technology, you get ranges that are far superior to what we're accustomed to. So I think we had an opportunity to speak at large with the engineers, design staff. We spent just a lot of time going through just every facet of the bus production itself. And like I said, very impressive. Ed chauffeured us as a bus driver one day, and we got to go out and test the buses there. Very, very impressive. Everything from the fact that the batteries are in the floor to what I thought was really cool was the mirror technology, video mirrors that give a wider range of visibility for the operators, and which translates into, I would assume, safer operation, down to just the comfort of the coach itself, all level, the floor level. And then, you know, everything down to the details of sitting down and talking about fit and finish and that sort of detail was impressive to me. I think that I walked away with a very favorable impression of Ebusco, of the 40-foot coaches, of the fact that they very much want to deliver quality to Link Transit if we end up going down this road with them. I think that it was very, like I said, very palpable that they are striving to produce a product that is superior. So I felt it was very, very positive. You know, in looking at and we'll get into this, I'm sure, but looking at the value proposition, I think it's extremely strong. And I really do think that this is something that we need to give a serious look at. Those are my initial impressions. Happy to answer any questions.
Sure, and I would echo everything that Mark has said. It was a very impressive operation. I think they have some 600 employees, so they're looking at this process from every which way imaginable. But for me, what was even more impressive was talking to one of their clients. We actually went to see an operation. I've forgotten the name of the town. Harlem. And the CEO's comment to us was, you know, this is a partnership that if we find that there's a problem with the bus, we can sit down with them and figure out how to fix it. He said, honestly, it's never been a perfect system. It will continue to never be a perfect system, but they're willing to work with us and get the problem fixed. And he said, they're the only company that's done that with us. So that was very impressive.
Yeah, they're in the Harlem operations is Transdev, which is one of the large contracting companies, both in the US and in Europe. They have 180 Ebusco vehicles operating out of that facility, and they had it down. It was really amazing to watch how they could run the buses through. That's the only place they charge them on their entire system. They run from Harlem to Amsterdam, which is about 40 miles apart on a regular route. It's their busiest route in the Amsterdam system, connecting the two urban areas there. I said it was really interesting to watch, and it was very impressive. I was very impressed with both the operation and how Transdev, which they're a private company, they're buying these vehicles based on the tender that the public agency puts out. The public agency says we want X number of hours of service and we want electric vehicle, and then the private company decides who they're going to put in that area.
Which that piece of it was impressive to me, being a for-profit organization, they have a little bit different perspective. And so, you know, for me, that was, as Rob said, that was probably the most important. Yeah, it was really important to get that positive feel from everybody from the president on down through the engineering staff and so on and so forth. But to hear from the CEO of TransDev that a very positive and a willingness, like Rob said, to sit down and work through in what are inevitable challenges that come along. We always have those, but it's how a company looks at addressing those. That's most important. So that, I think, from a for-profit corporation to have that sort of praise, I thought was pretty impressive.
Any questions?
Yeah, did they do inductive charging, or will it matter with the fact that they can go that many more miles?
They don't do inductive charging. They told us that that's something that was a deal maker for us, that they could look at it, but they could not do it for the price, and they could not do it on the time scale they had proposed. Ed and I looked at this as an opportunity to not have to put remote charging in. And I think the fundamental, maybe the best way is to set a stage first. So our BYD fleet is really good vehicles. I don't want to be negative at all. And our performance operating them is actually really positive. We get an average about 1.8 kilowatts per mile traveled. That's our energy use. BYD tells customers to assume about 2.1 kilowatts per mile. So we get about 20% better than what they tell the customers to assume. A big part of that is our operators just are doing a good job in how they're operating the vehicle, being able to maximize some of the elements. And they use us as an example of sort of the extremes that are possible. So 1.8 is a great number for us. And we have some people that even do better than that, but 1.8 on average is a good number. Ebusco, the data they showed us, all the computer information shows they're operating at 1 kilowatt per mile. That's 80% better than what our current technology is. And the reason behind that is part of what Mark mentioned, which is their bus is a carbon fiber vehicle, so it weighs 14,000 pounds less than the BYD coach does. And even though it's a 40-foot longer vehicle and seats more people, it actually weighs a lot less. The battery management system is just better in terms of what they get off of the regeneration from the wheels and what they get going forward. So there's a lot of things about that make that performance numbers as high as they are. And that's really the big difference for us. They're not really putting that many more batteries on this bus. There are 383 kilowatts of battery storage. That's about what we have we have 350 on our 35-foot BYDs. So, you know, there's another 30 kilowatts of power in it, but the bus goes a lot further on that. We get about 190 miles out of our BYDs without charging. They're telling us we can get any 350 to 360 miles out of a single charge, which would allow us to run 2 round trips to Manson and back. Then we'd have to plug it in and charge for an hour and a half to get it back up. And but that actually works on the Route 21, bringing it back in that way and charging it. So we don't need to put the charging infrastructure in to make it work in this particular environment. In the future, we might want to do that, but today we don't need to, and it just adds cost, and we don't have a charger line anyway. So I mean, that's part of the value in this, was trying this out to see how it goes forward. Let's see, anything else I wanted to bring up on Ebusco?
Yes, Mark.
You may want to speak about, I don't know if you want to speak about the power or the battery storage.
Yeah, the energy storage. Yeah, that was probably the most actually surprise of the entire visit for me. Was they took us out to look at a bus that we took a ride on. As we walked past, we said, "Is that energy storage?" And they had these 20-foot shipping containers that opened up for us that are 3 megawatts of electric energy storage, with air conditioning and heating, the whole, self-contained, you drop it on the site and plug your chargers into it. It was like, wow, that's really impressive. Turnkey, using the same batteries come out of the buses. So when the batteries were out on your bus, you can move them over to the energy storage. I mean, it was exactly the vision that we've been talking about going forward. And then they dropped the hammer, which really shocked me, was they told us what the cost was. To buy a 3 megawatt storage system fully developed out there, it was just a little over $1 million. We were getting quotes of 1.2 million per megawatt. They can deliver 3 megawatts of storage for $1 million. And they actually gave us a proposal that offers that. I didn't put it on the agenda because I really wanted to have a broader conversation before we talk about energy storage, because there's more to that than I wasn't expecting them to offer that service, to be honest. And there's some more due diligence we need to check on the energy storage, but that essentially by putting energy storage out in the op space and potentially down here, you can take the entire demand charge issue off the cost of electric, which would cut our cost in half on electric, which is already 15% of what we spend on diesel fuel. So it actually sort of, and we looked at doing batteries a couple of years ago, and we couldn't make a pencil at the higher cost they are in the US. 3 times cheaper than it was in the US. It makes it pencil. It actually becomes a real positive. And so I do think you're going to see something from us on that at some point, but that was amazing. I was like, why in the heck is this that much cheaper? I kind of knew buses were cheaper in Europe, but the battery storage was truly shocking.
Hey, Richard.
Yes.
How do our current buses and potentially these buses, how do they do in the cold weather operations like we're living today? Does it significantly reduce the range or minimal impact?
The way they tell us they've designed their bus and what Transdev reported, which it gets cold in the Netherlands, they use a battery heating different than the way we do it on our BYDs, but they do manage cold quite well, actually. I was actually rather surprised by what we saw. They're doing it through a software management. So as the charging infrastructure keeps a constant flow through the battery to keep it warm, it doesn't charge it at full scale, so it doesn't damage the battery, but it keeps it warm enough that you don't have any range issues. And then Ebusco also does a diesel-fired supplemental heat, the same way our vehicles do, and that's standard on their equipment. We have to pay extra for that on the US side. Because if it gets below 30 degrees, your heat pumps, at least in a mobile source, don't work anymore. And so you have to use resistance heating, and that does cut your range. But if you have the supplemental diesel heat, you don't have the range cut because you never get into the resistance heating. And that's part of the way Ebusco designs it. So it does look like it'll work just fine in cold. We have some questions on the heat, though, and that is one of the big unknowns that I think was there. We were, I think, universally surprised their batteries are not liquid cooled. They do an air cooled battery system on their vehicle. And we made a big point of that. And they said, well, we'll cool these batteries because we expect to be selling these buses in Saudi Arabia and Pakistan, some other places where we have to deal with the heat. And we told them that you're right at the heat edge. What we had last summer at 113 degrees for several days, that's 45 degrees centigrade. The safety point on lithium-ion battery is 50. You start damaging the battery above 50 degrees centigrade. And with the energy the heat that's generated by using the battery, if it's 45 degrees outside, your battery is going to be over 50 degrees. So active cooling is pretty important from my perspective in our climate. What they were willing to do, and this is not in the current draft contract they sent, and it's why I'm not asking, when we get to the item, I'm not asking for approval to do anything off the contract because it's not, in my mind, set yet. What they told us when we were in Guarne and what my expectations are is that they will either give us a performance guarantee that the batteries will be able to deal with the heat, and if they won't, they will replace them or upgrade them to a liquid cooled system, or they're going to just do a liquid cooled to start with, and that's going to be part of the process. I got the very strong impression, I don't know if you folks pick up the same, that their intention is to do liquid for us. It just may mean the buses are gonna be a little later being delivered than what we expected.
And I kind of saw that in the 18-month because we had heard, or at least it was my impression, that they were going to try to draw that delivery time down. And so that I think you're right, Richard. I think that they built in that to be able to accommodate that.
And so I have chatted with them since they sent us the proposals, and they did say that yes, they are open to a performance contract that guarantees that they will deliver something that works both the hot and the cold in our climate, and sort of the same way that BYD did 6 years ago. So that's a risk. It's something I want you to be aware of. You know, the guarantees are only as good as the company giving you them. I think that's part of why I wanted board members to attend, because most of these harder decisions are going to be after I'm retired. So I wanted a full understanding of what the risks are going into this equation. So it's everything that we thought we were talking about in terms of performance of the vehicle. At least from my perspective, the visit showed us they actually do that. Cooling, I still have some questions about that. That's got to be addressed in a better way before we spend some money with them. But if that issue is resolved, I think it really is an effective vehicle for us. So I think that's the visit part of it, and we can get into the other issues when we talk about the action item.
Randy, did you have a question?
I did. That the private company, just out of curiosity, did they mention any issues that they're dealing with at the moment? Just as examples of, like you said, nothing's perfect. And
yeah, I'm trying to think.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what some of the issue. I want to say it was surrounding the charging, but I could be wrong on that.
I think they were having some issue with how the information was being displayed in the dispatch station for the operators, so that one of the things that became very clear in this presentation was it only works if your dispatchers and your drivers and the manufacturer are managing the system. The dispatcher's got to track where the energy consumption is, and if it's, let's say you have a driver who's not quite as sharp on managing regeneration, and so the bus is using more energy, dispatch has to notice that to say, okay, when can I pull this out, put it back to charge, and put something else in, and make those arrangements to happen. And if you don't do that, then you can end up with the bus running out of energy, sort of worst thing, you know, stuck, they have to be towed, or a gap in service because you didn't have the buses available because you didn't have your energy managed right. And a lot of it, it's my recollection, was a lot of that was the conversation, was getting initially the programming set up so that it set alarms off and set off other issues that the staff could in fact keep that performance going so they could keep the buses operating.
That was the other impression too that I had, was the amount of information that they collect and can make available to us is amazing. At least it was to me. I mean, every detail about the operation of that bus was collected and available, and not only available, but used to see where improvements needed to be made. So I thought that was impressive.
Transdev indicated that that's not always the case. In fact, at least one of the companies that we deal with, and they also mentioned Mercedes, they tend to hold back certain information, whereas all that information is provided by Busco without question. So that was impressive too. Anything else? Okay.
Thank you.
Ahead. Thank you. Okay. Now, Nick, I think it's fine. So we're going to talk about Link Transit's proposed operating capital budget for fiscal year 2023. This will be part of the public hearing.
Okay. Well, happy holidays, everybody. Last month we went through the board. But
I think you need to officially open the public hearing.
Okay, so it is now 3:46. We'll officially open the public hearing. And now you may begin.
Okay, thank you. So last month we went through the budget workshop. I have not heard any questions on that, so we're going to do a quick review of that today. And then when we get out of the public hearing, we'll go for the adoption. Okay. So, as reported last month, our 2023 revenues will come in at about $31,562,000. The bulk of that sales tax, about $24 million. This is about a 5% increase over what we projected for this year. Grants will come in about 5.2, almost 5.3 million. That's state and federal grants. I'm sorry, the federal grants are 5307 is 5.3, and then our state grants is almost $2 million. Interest is 169,000. Other income about 21,000, which includes leases, listed grant, miscellaneous income. Total 31,561. Our operating expenses would be about 25,144. This does include the expansion of about, I want to say 19,000 hours, just over here. 19%, I'm sorry, 20,000 additional hours as budgeted in Vision 2020. Although we don't, you know, we don't anticipate probably getting enough operators to extend it to all those hours. We want to put in the budget so that we're going forward with the idea that we are tracking that, and that is our goal to get to those hours. So wages and benefits are about $18,619,000. Supplies, which includes fuel, which fuel went up, over doubled, is 2.8, almost 2.9 million. Services about 1.7 million. Utilities 415,000. Purchase transportation 239,000. Insurance almost 700, and other, which is dues, travel, training, or per diem, leases, is about 600,000 for a total of 25,144,000. Okay. So with that. So our operating revenue of 31,562 minus the operating budget of 25 million, that leaves us about excess revenue of about $6.4 million to put into our reserves. The capital budget's 34,665,000. Out of that, it's about 11 million, almost $12 million worth of grants if we did all those projects. Reserves are about, out of our reserves, almost about $23 million. One project we have in there for the $12.5 million is a pedestrian tunnel, the pedestrian tunnel going under the railroad tracks, the TTC. I think that is going to be pulled out. We're not going to be doing that next year. We have the plans, we have the ability to apply for a grant 2 more years down the road. And I think we could probably fund it at least 80%. And the TTC and the other, they have to get on board to make sure that I would think they would pay for the match on that part. We did put in our capital budget $750,000 for the East Wenatchee Park and Ride lot. I just got an estimate back today. This actually was a bid. Where the East Wenatchee parking lot is on the 3rd and Rock Island Road. We went in partners with the city of East Wenatchee. They're putting a light in at that same location. So our budget said 750. We were just picking basically a number, what it would cost us to redesign that lot and put a comfort station and the vault for our charger. Came in at 499. So I was pretty happy with that. Yeah. So we're already saving money. Transfers to the reserves, 7.5 million to vehicle reserves, 4 million to facilities, 400,000 to contingency, for a total transfers of about $12 million. And projected ending cash balances, operating cash at the end of 2023, we spent everything. So 17,455,000, vehicle reserves, 830,000, 1.4 for facilities, 3.9 for contingency, and $1 million in there for the sales tax refund.
Hey, Nick.
Yeah.
Real quick, it's in the one document, but you've got it that are the vehicle reserves are going to be at the end of next year will be 829.4 million. I don't think you have that much money, right?
829,000. It's 829,000. Yeah. Did I say million?
Yeah, million. It's a rounding error.
Oh, okay. Which document? I'm sorry, Clay.
It was on sheet 4 or 5. I think it's where I may have jumped ahead. It's on the agenda item. Since you were going over, I just wanted to throw that out. Page 4 or 5 that you got it typed up.
Oh, the memo?
Yeah. I thought that was the case. I just wanted to double check.
No, you're right. That's definitely a mistake.
Yeah. Oh, I'm stretching.
Take it up in volume.
So much for saving money.
Yeah, well, thanks, Clay. Appreciate that.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay, that is the end of the slide. Oh, the handouts here we have in your board packet is a memo, talks about our budgeting process and going forward in the 23 budget. We have the operating summary. Now, this is the same summary that we handed out at the last board meeting. The only changes was the transfers to vehicle replacement. We originally had 5 million. After we recalculated our cash and closing the books out, getting closer, we had to bump it up to 7.5 million because we had additional expenses with the Busco buses and stuff. That still leaves us about 17,455,000 roughly at the end of the year for just operating cash. The next sheet after that, after the summary, is the expenses by category. And this is kind of looks at things, you look at the 22 budget, 22 year-end projection, the 23 budget, everything broken down between wages, benefits, services, materials, what we had budgeted in 2020, what we actually did spend, and what we're budgeting this year and the differences. So this looks at it a different way, how we spend our money. Any questions? Okay, and the last one after that is our capital budget. The last sheet, same thing. We have some carryover projects in 2022. They're in the top section for about $13,705,000, and below that is facility maintenance projects are new for 2023. As you can see right down there, we have East Comanche Park and Ride lot for $750,000. So already saved some money. Give some money for Randy's part.
Absolutely, we can build some bathrooms.
The Hay Canyon property, I do have highlighted because that's scheduled to close on the 29th this month. So it'll go into this year's budget, not next year. Wasn't sure, we left it open through the 10th of January, so I wasn't actually sure of the date. So we're spending that earlier. And then the vehicle maintenance, we have 6 Busco or electric buses in there. If we do more, I think we're going to be okay on the capital budget, because we have that additional funds in there for the TTC, the tunnel and pedestrian bridge, and we have $12 million. So we should be more than enough adequate to fund the additional buses if we choose to do that.
So the reason the TTC is not going to go forward this year was we had applied for a grant, pulled back when the project cost went so high. They asked us to resubmit, and then they decided not to spend any of that money. So it's 2 years before the grants will be available again to put that project together. So we did the work and got it done, but it's, if we don't get the state match, my sense of value to Link is that it's not enough to do it on our own. I mean, we theoretically have the money to do that, but I don't think the value is there if we pay for it. If we can get a state grant, and then we're paying the match, and particularly if we can get the partnership with the TTC, then I think there's a project that makes sense for the agency to do, and I would look at applying for it again in a year and a half.
And the last sheet is the 10-year cash flow. Starts off with the up at the top row, it has the beginning operating cash and operating expenses, percentage of increases, or I'm sorry, revenues. The red is the expenses and the increases, percentage increases. The blue line is the ending operating cash, less the transfers, and then you have equal the operating cash less the transfers. And then the bottom section is the vehicle, facility, and contingency reserve accounts. So the bottom line is, you go clear down the ending total cash, that's still healthy, even with our capital budget of $34 million, which we're pulling out 22 million if we did everything. We still have almost $24.5 million left over total cash. And then it fluctuates and goes up depending on what we're doing. It drops down quite a bit in 2027 because we had put quite a bit of money in there for a facility redesign or build out. We weren't sure what it is. We put $17 million in there just for the placeholder going into the future. No idea how that's going to come out. And we'll probably phase it in, I would think, like the bus garage parking and then facilities, and see how it all plays out. So, any questions on the 2023 budget?
I have a question, but I'll wait till the public hearing is closed.
Okay.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
I need to clarify, and you're doing things differently than when I was once clerk. So doing the Zoom, my understanding is the public notice indicated that any public comments needed to be submitted to the board clerk. And I just checked email. I've gotten no public comments at this point yet. These documents were posted as part of your board packet on the website. So they are available for people to look at on the website. And I'm pulling them up now and they are clearly viewable. It could be that someone may send in something in the next day or so. And if that does come in, I will make sure to distribute that to the board members. But because of the way they use the Zoom now, they are not able to actually call in and talk at this point. But that was indicated in the public notice.
If they wanted to make a presentation, they would need to come in person.
Yeah.
And Maria, we don't have anyone here present today that from the public to make comments.
At this point, unless someone stands forward.
It appears everyone's staff.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well,
next thing we close.
Just go ahead and close the. So we're at 3:59. We'll go ahead and close the public hearing. And we'll go right into our discussion action items.
Now it's my turn. Now that you close the public hearing. I just had a quick question under the budget assumptions. And talking about the STIC grants. It says we currently need or exceed 5 out of the 6 categories. I was just curious, what's the one category we're missing?
Oh, passenger miles per, it's revenue miles, is that right?
That rings a bell, but I can't remember.
It's a passenger mile related. There's 2 passenger mile incentives. We make one, we don't make the other. And so passenger miles, the number of miles each individual passenger travels.
We can verify that, bring it back next time.
It was, I was just curious. And also, what is that one worth? Because I know these are tied to dollars. So.
$360,000 each, I believe, is what they're worth this year. That's gone up. Yeah, that was one of the wins I was able to work into it. So it's a 3% of the total funding is available for the STIC program. It used to be 2. So we got a large increase in the availability of the incentive funds.
I believe that out of the 5.2, it's the bulk of the 5.2.
Well, you got to remember the 5.2 has been carried over from the current year.
Yeah.
So our total is
4.2. Okay.
Anything else, Randy?
No, the only reason I bring that up for any newer members, when we went fare free, these STIC things, they don't totally offset, but they take a huge portion of the lack of fare revenue we get from meeting these goals.
Back in 2011, when the last recession hit us hard, we attempted to do a fare increase to take us to $1.25 on our urban fares. What we lost in ridership cost us more in STIC than we were gaining in the fare revenue, which is why we dropped the fare back down to $1, went fare free in our circulator service downtown, was to try to get the volume numbers, because we were getting another $150,000 in fare revenue, but it was costing us almost $500,000 in federal funds. So it was part of the justification for that, and part of why we knew that we can do fare free, because we've been doing it on those 3 routes for several years.
Okay, let's move on. We're going to get into our action items. Nick, you're back up to talk about Link Transit operating capital budget for fiscal year 2023, resolution 2022-11.
Move to approve.
Second.
Thank you.
Okay, we got
It's snowing out there.
We got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you.
I'd like to recognize Bob's pragmatic.
There was no nays?
There were no nays.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, Richard, retention incentive program potential.
Okay, so when you approved the retention incentive program, it was through the end of December, so it is back before you to be considered. Our recommendation is a little soft on this, and there's a reason behind that, so let me explain where we're at. We don't know it's working. We don't really have a lot of information. What we do know is we've gotten no worse since we've put this in place. We've not lost more staff, which was happening previously. So our situation is better than it was, but we're not getting ahead of the curve yet. We also don't have a contract yet with the union. So if we don't approve this, it will end at December 31st, which will be cutting income for some of the existing people. Probably not the message we want to send. But I can't tell you it's solving the problem. I don't think we have enough information to know that at this point. We did also, as we put the budget together, hear very clearly what was said by the board, which was you would prefer to have us address the income issue, the income issues through the budget and the actual wage scales rather than trying to do incentives long term. And we've attempted to do that through the budget. So there's been some adjustment there, and those will go into effect. But that doesn't cover the union because of the union contract issues. I mean, so I think it makes sense for us to continue it. I think there are consequences to doing that are unknown at this point. We've not seen any significant change in the labor market, except, like I said, it's stabilized at this point, but we are 76 people available for service, I think is the number we were at. Howard, is that right?
77.
77. Our budget's 96, so that's, we never come close to 96 for the service, and the budget for this coming year is 116, I think. So we got a long way to go to get to full staffing. So it seemed to have helped. It's what everybody else in the industry is doing, but we also attempted to address it in other fashions. And I mean, I had a little bit of concern about continuing it, and then if in a quarter we get next quarter our contract's done, we've made adjustments, do we end it and then we actually cutting wages or income for the people that are in the bargaining unit? I tend to think if we want to continue, we probably need to continue for the full year, or expect that we would have to do that unless flooded with employees. I just don't know. I mean, it's complicated, and like I said, it's a little soft. I think staff's perspective is things stopped getting worse, so that's really positive. But we didn't make a whole lot of progress, although it's only 2 months. So like I said, I'm being as honest as I can about this. I just don't know where to go with it. I know that I think our desire of everyone was to, address this through our through the wages, and I think we tried to make some adjustments there. But have we solved the problem? No, we haven't solved the problem yet.
One of the adjustments that I see here is going to a quarterly payout, and I guess
the thought behind that was because we approved this late, we didn't have a full quarter, and that was why I went to monthly. But one of the things that Howard and Lynn both came back with was we don't really want to reward people for staying one more month.
Yeah,
we want them to make a significant commitment, at least a quarterly basis to earn this. And I think that was their rationalization. I mean, I agree with that concept. Yeah. I wasn't here when the staff made that decision because I was in Europe at the time, but I think that makes sense. I think that is what we're trying to do. And I would agree with that. If we continue it, I would like to see that adjustment made. So in staff is recommending that we do it on a quarterly basis.
Richard, in looking at the matrix on the next page, I assume we do exit interviews. Mm-hmm. And do we have a sense, and I'm looking at operators more specifically, do we have a sense as to on those that quit from January through the end of the year, we have a sense as to what the common thread or common reason for those operators leaving. Do we know that?
Howard, you probably can answer
Do
that.
you have that on your spreadsheet?
What's that?
Do you have the reason for putting on the spreadsheet? Just number of credits.
Yeah, it's kind of all over the place as far as we have some that have retired, a couple retired, a couple moved out of the area.
Julie, can you speak up a little bit so that you might speak up?
And what I'm getting at is, I know that we have it broken down to those that retired and those that moved. I'm most specifically interested in those that quit and what the reasons were, if we know, as best we could ever know.
I know one, I'm aware of one that went for other employment. Yeah, oh yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I do know that one, yeah, at least a couple that I know went for other employment. Other than that, I don't have that information here at the moment.
Okay. I mean, the feedback I've heard from everyone on this has been that we had a few people leave because at least several months ago, we were lower than some of our competitors. Waste Management actually got a few of our commercial licensed people. The bigger one has been when they start having to work shifts and it's the weekend and the evening work. It's a bigger impact on their families they're willing to accept for the wages look like. Okay, I think that if I could put in anything, that's the thread, is that once they try it, it's like, no, this is, I can't get time to do things I want to do. Julie, I'm just taking secondhand comments from our staff and so forth. But Howard, do you got anything else you want to add, or Julia, on the issue? I mean,
no, we haven't had a whole lot of people leaving, so it's kind of like, it's like basically what Julie said. There's many reasons people leave, and it's not really a real common thread at this point.
Well, what I'm getting at, I guess, is that we're trying to solve a problem that we have, and if you look at the terminated, we can see how many were terminated. We can see how many retired. And or moved out of the area. Are we really solving the problem that we're trying to solve with this? And if you look at this, I don't know that we are. And again, I know 1 quarter is probably not long enough to get a good read on that. I voiced my concern early on with this approach simply because I don't have a lot of confidence it's getting at the heart of the issue. That being said, I will say that probably not enough to have a fair idea of whether or not when I look at this information, it just causes me to think, and I'm already skeptical. Are we really hitting the bullseye or even hitting the target for that matter? And I'm not sure we are.
I think it's so difficult to find help to begin with, and you terminated almost as many as that quit. So is that a problem of what's out there, or is that a problem with us?
I mean, the line I've had is that we've had, in terms of quality of applicants, is just not has been as high as we've seen in the past. We've had some good hires. We've also had some that, there are a group that just never figure out how to spatially operate a bus safely. And that's a big part of the, a trainer will come back and say, they're just not getting it, or they can't pass the tests to get the license. Not much we can do about that. If the person can't operate, that's going to happen, or they show us a real pattern of failure to make it on time. We've had 1 or 2 of those that, we're a bus agency. We got people got to be here. And if they are doing in probation, not showing up, that's the time you got to get rid of them. So I mean, those are the termination issues for the most part, and partly that's just when you don't have as many people to choose from, you're ending up sometimes taking folks and I don't want to be negative about it. We've got some good people, and I don't want to say it's terrible, but I think that is part of the issue that's out there.
The other piece of this too that I'm sorry.
I have a couple of observations, and Bob, you had one of them with the termination. So thanks for addressing that, Richard. But, you know, I still think that we haven't seen the results of what's going to transpire in the economy over the next year. And I truly, you know, I hate to be the ball humbug, but I think this labor market's going to sort itself out. You know, when the economy goes down, people aren't necessarily jumping the ship to look for other jobs. The construction industry is going to take a hit. There'll be probably some more opportunities for employment. You know, I hope I'm wrong too. And I think 24 million of sales tax revenue is going to be a stretch as well. I think the back half of 23 is not going to be a good year. So, you know, and in dealing with the, you know, the shifts where you have the most difficult time hiring people on the weekend shifts and so forth, that to me is in my business world has always been dealt with differentials, you know, shift differentials and so forth. I think that's a better investment on the money for retention for those off shift hours, you know, where they do sacrifice their weekends and so forth. But that's just a couple of, you know, things I wanted to, you know, mention.
From my perspective, this was brought up to us a couple months ago. The issue was we're just not paying enough. So we need to give something basically to keep people from leaving. By passing the budget we just passed, we gave a significant pay increase. So personally, I don't see the need to continue this for 3 months, much less another year. And we just addressed the issue. If pay is the issue, then we address that. If that's not the issue, then you've got other problems, and I don't think throwing more money at it's going to make a difference.
So just to, as I said, I think we, at least for half of the staff, did that on. We don't have a contract yet, so we don't have a wage increase on the operators.
That will help give them an incentive to get their contract done.
Again, like I said, this is a soft recommendation because I have all the same concerns you guys are raising. I mean, all I can tell you is that in the industry, no one's moving away from their incentives. That this labor shortage, even in places that are having bigger economic impacts, I mean, where they're actually seeing a reduction in sales tax, where they're seeing reductions of the economy because of the shrinkages, which we're not, and we tend to lag anyway. I mean, I think that's just the reality of our community, but they're holding on. So I hate giving up something that at least seems to have stabilized. I do agree with you, Randy, that for the non-bargaining staff, we've attempted to deal with this because we had no assurance this was going to continue. I mean, I'd be very blunt. That was part of the reason the budget was put together the way it was. So like I said, I'm very conflicted about this, and I don't think staff was significantly different on this. It's a recommendation, but it's a soft recommendation because I think everything that people have raised is true. But on the same token, we're way behind where we're supposed to be. Not only were we 21 people short this year, we're short the expansion that was supposed to take place as well. And catching up on that is going to take a lot of people. And, so we went the wrong direction. We shrank. We actually are operating fewer weekday hours than we were 2.5 years ago. And I really don't want to have that happen again. So that's the other trade-off. And I think long-term, people may be right. But so I mean, keeping it would be insurance. I'm not sure it's, like I said, it's a soft recommendation. I'm not adamant at this point, whereas I was before. I thought we had to do something because we were desperately making service cuts that we just didn't want to do. I would hate to be back in that situation 2 months from now. That's my only major reason for the soft recommendation.
Mark, you had something else?
Yeah, just another ancillary concern I have is that, and I think Richard, you touched on this, is that the longer we foster this program, if you will, the more it becomes something that's very difficult to remove or sunset. And I think that is a real concern. least it is, it should be a concern for consideration.
Bobby has something more?
Yeah, I did a little bit. You know, we have a pretty good crew in Chelan, but when East Wenatchee offers a $5,000 signing bonus, it makes it difficult. And they haven't done a wonderful job. I just don't think the people are out there, whether you give the incentive pay or not. There's just too many people who don't want to work, and I don't know what the remedy to that is. I don't know if this is it or not.
And as Bob is saying, my concern is that we can't afford to lose the people that we have because we're having such a difficult time recruiting for people. We're going to have a tough time replacing them. So,
and I think that was really what this retention incentive was to keep the people we have, because particularly at the the bottom of our scale, we were losing people on both sides, operators as well, and other people were doing this sort of the ratcheting game, unfortunately. And I mean, I don't like that from a business perspective. It's not a great place to be, but on the same token, we're just holding our own. If we lose any more people, we're going to have to cut further. And the cuts we made were painful enough as they are. We had this conversation about what goes next, and it's nothing that anyone wants to lose. I mean, we're at a place where we're giving back stuff that is actually productive, and that's not the place that I don't think any of us want to go. And so that is the sole argument for keeping it, from my perspective, is we don't want to do what we had to do in October and cut service that we promised the public and cut service that's working. And that's where we're at now. We have to cut service that's actually it's not that it's non-productive, that it was lop off. We're cutting stuff that people care about.
Do we know what these people did that quit? Did they go back in some kind of a system, or did they go to work somewhere else?
Well, I think it's a real mix. I mean, going forward, we had some people that went and took other jobs. I mean, and there was competition out there, jobs that didn't require them to work weekends and nights. I mean, I think that's a big part of the pressure issue. The other piece of this has been, there was a group that moved out of the area. Well, there was a couple that just left because they didn't want to deal with the governmental restrictions, particularly during the pandemic, when we were the last employer in the area that had mask requirements. I mean, that because of the federal requirements. And so there was some of that stuff as well that impacted how people felt about working in the organization. One of the big issues, and people have been creative as hell on that, managing it, is childcare. There just isn't childcare available anymore. I mean, half of all the childcare centers in the state shut down since the pandemic, and no new ones have come into existence.
Well, they didn't shut down there, so we had them shut down because federal state regulations said you had almost have to be a nurse practitioner to have a childcare. Sure. And a lot of them goes, we don't meet the qualifications. So it's more than just.
Well, but I think from the practical standpoint, and I understand. I mean, I'm not trying to be cute about that, but that does have that impact. That people that no longer can get childcare, if they don't have the family support system, they're not trading childcare off between themselves, which is the creativity that we've seen in our staff. You're not moving anyplace.
Yeah, to answer one of your questions about if they move into another program, for the most part, for most employees that resign voluntarily, they are not then qualified for employment security benefits.
One more thing. I assume, just guessing, with the contract, whenever it gets finished, we will have addressed the payroll issue there.
Well, it depends on what the negotiations. I'm assuming that's going to be the case, that we're going to end up with because I think our interests are aligned on those issues. And so I'm assuming we're going to get to a place that will address going forward. It's one of the big concerns about keeping this is that once you get a contract, then what do you do? I feel those concerns too. Like I said, the sole reason I can tell you that I would be interested in keeping it is I just don't want to have to cut more service. And it's not like we've made any progress at this point. We haven't gone backwards. And I think that's the positive piece is we haven't gone backwards. Is this enough to make a difference? I don't know. I really don't.
So is there, would there be an issue of saying, we're going to extend it until such time as the contract is not later than March 31?
I think that's, and that's part of why I wanted to have the board as a conversation, because that might be a safe place to have a conversation about.
We want to get the
point of clarification. Yes.
Yeah, I think there's a difficulty in tying it to the approval of the contract, because then you get into an issue regarding coercion and unfair labor practice. So my recommendation would be to divest this from the contract.
Not later than March 31.
I think Jim Fletcher has a comment.
Yes, Jim.
Thank you. I'm still here. Yes. Yeah, I think the whole labor issue is really far bigger and more complex than what we can solve with a incentive. Everybody, crunch back here in town, they can't hire labor. They've had to change productions, and that's what's happening in a lot of industries. They have to reduce. They have to reinvent. They have to change what they're doing to fit what the labor market is right now, because we don't know what it's going to be like going forward. It's too volatile. And yes, we don't want to reduce service, but I think that really is what we have to do. We have to adjust and change our service to fit what we can get the labor for. We have to address the wages in the contract. And it's not going to be pleasant, but it's what is going on globally.
I have one other thing.
Yes, Randy.
I wasn't finished there. So anyway, when the contract's done, we're kind of mixing two concepts here. One, a hiring bonus, and one, retention. I'm not interested in the retention thing continuing, but I'm willing to look at a hiring bonus. That's my opinion. If getting new people is your issue, then let's offer a hiring bonus. But paying everybody just to stay here, I don't want them leaving. But on the other hand, again, I think we've addressed that and are addressing it through the payroll. That's my opinion.
Yeah. It's I think as everyone has said, it is just, we just don't know. We are in an area that's gotten a heck of a lot more expensive. And I know the painful conversations we've had with a couple of people that have left have been that they didn't leave because they were unhappy. They left because they can make more money elsewhere and they can meet their needs for the family better that way. And it wasn't that they were unhappy with the culture or anything else. It just was, they had to follow where the money was. And that's a concern. And is this enough? 4 or 5 years ago, I would have said there's no question it's enough. But the universe is different. We didn't have the cost of housing change the way that it has in our area as much. So that's the concern that I've got going forward. And we've made promises to the public for service, and there's not a whole lot you can, I wish there was automation solutions that we could look at, but I don't think we're at that place yet.
Yes, Ann.
It sounds like we're not remaining competitive in the market from your description with regard to salaries for a lot of our staff, not just our operators. But from the spreadsheet you provided, it looks like we've got a lot of people moving for better paying jobs, as you've described. Mm-hmm. Since we aren't at a place where we have a negotiated contract yet, this feels like a pretty good stopgap for us in the short term, and it's only for a couple more months. And if I feel like this could be a really good just kind of holding place for us. I also like the modification that changes it to a quarterly payment rather than a monthly payment, and it can be prorated. That gives us a lot more flexibility, and it also keeps it from being extra work for staff if they're only addressing this quarterly with staff. So I think that as we're continuing forward and continuing to negotiate, and we don't have something we're working with that hopefully will close that gap, I think that this is a good step for us to just continue forward. Richard, you've also described that we just don't have enough information because it's been in place for such a short period of time. I don't feel like not having information is a reason to just stop right now and jeopardize the jeopardize our staffing levels and our service levels.
Mark, you had something else?
Question and then comment. Okay. Question, Richard, if we were to continue this for another quarter, is there the ability to perhaps be more, I guess, be more specific about, or more intentional about how we implement this? And I'm thinking most specifically as it relates to operations and facilities, because that's where we see, and at least that's where I understand our biggest loss and need for recruitment to be. Can we be more specific of tailoring the program to target that need or that area of concern? And then second, I guess my comment is at some point in time, whether it's my position with the county or the other boards that I sit on, we have to look at our operations and with the eye of, are we being sustainable? I mean, that's just the reality of it. And we are blessed right now for a lot of different reasons to have some resources that other entities simply don't have. That being said, we do have an obligation to be looking down the road at whatever we're making in terms of decisions today. They've got to be sustainable. And I really have a concern about that when we continue a program that becomes almost institutionalized. And that's my concern, that it becomes institutionalized. It's hard to take away something that has been given, you know, and that's just.
Well, and I think if we continue it for the quarter, which is all we're asking for at this point. I mean, I think there's some logic going longer, but I think that's all we're asking for. Partially is the contract issues that are out there as well. That we would want to talk to everybody about what this means and that it is not a long-term commitment, because it was trying to get us through a tough period. And I think that's a key element for us, is to have those conversations so that people don't feel like they were cut off at the knees when it ends. It was never intended to be permanent. This was intended to be, we've got a problem. We want to recognize people that are keeping us whole right now. That is the way it has to be presented. It's not meant to be an additional salary on top of the salary. It's meant as a thank you for helping us keep things running the way
an incentive to keep people, not a thank you for work already.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yes, it's a work incentive, and I understand it's not a gift. But I think we need to say this is not, going forward. It's not intended to try to offset wages that were wrong, because we're trying to address the wages.
Okay, one more comment, Randy.
Okay, I was just a question. Can we do this for another 3 months on just the bargaining unit, since they don't have a contract? Can we just address the pay on the non-bargaining unit with the budget we just passed?
Are you asking for the legal opinion?
Yeah.
So legally, yes, you can create an incentive program to target specific departments. What I would not recommend doing is targeting towards specific employees where you may have discrimination type concerns. People are treated differently, but classes of employees can be treated in a different way.
Yeah, and we've been really reticent of going down that path because we have a bunch of employees that in most organizations are in the union with the operators. And if we provide the union the benefit that we're not providing our non-bargaining staff, it wouldn't take much for those guys to join the unions. And that's not a small number of individuals. If you look at almost any other transit system, their maintenance staff and facility staffs are part of the union.
But we just addressed one half of them.
Well, hopefully, but the problem is if you keep it on one, because they haven't negotiated a contract, so why are they getting the benefit and we're not?
Yeah.
We hear that all the time.
Yeah, because you just got a raise.
I understand, Randy. I'm not saying you're wrong necessarily, but I'm also saying that is an impact. That is a challenge we have to deal with. One that I'm concerned about.
Yeah, and I want to further clarify as well. I don't recommend setting just bargaining unit versus non-bargaining unit as the way of defining the classes, because that can be an unfair labor practice and coercive. So you would need to look at actual classes of employees. So if this were to apply to coach operators, or if it would apply to facilities maintenance, it's those types of classes. So I do want to be very careful about how you proceed with that. You do have very specific labor counsel that's not present today, and I would recommend, if you are going to target it in that way, that you would run it by your labor counsel as well.
Yeah. Particularly since we're in negotiation, it just makes anything change difficult.
All right, Jim, then Ann, then Mark.
Okay, I guess maybe, if you look at extending this thing, I want to know, or what can we do in the next 3 months to come up with some other solution? Because money alone is not the solution. We have to address it more incremental or more action-wise, so that in 3 months we're not sitting here having the same debate. What can we do? What else can we do just besides money?
Oh, wait, while we ponder that, Jim, I'll go to Ann.
I think in a lot of ways it is kind of about money, but it's how that money is distributed and allocated, correct? So my question is, during negotiations, is there conversation about various different types of differential? Because I think that will help like transit stay competitive, kind of like what Clay had brought up earlier. Well, night differential and weekend differential and that sort of thing. Do we know if that's going on?
Well, you are going to have a closed session later today to discuss ongoing negotiations. So I want to be a little bit careful about discussing what's talked about in those closed bargaining sessions and an open public meeting, because we haven't given the union notice that we're going to do that. And there's no agreement about sharing those conversations. Okay. So I would recommend that we not talk about the specifics of bargaining in the open session.
Hey, Aaron, real quick. Just for educate me, the taxpayers, I mean, end of the day, we got to be cognizant of the taxpayers, and the taxpayers are funding this operation. Why doesn't the taxpayers have a public input into union negotiations? Why is that behind closed door?
Well, that's a complicated question, so I'll give a little bit of a short answer for today. The negotiations themselves are between two entities, right, that come to the table to meet. You are the public entity. The union is not. They are an entity that you're negotiating with. There have been some municipalities that have sought to kind of open that door in negotiations, but there's a process that you have to go through before that can happen. You have not gone through that process yet. The public's component in the information regarding the negotiated contract comes when you are actually presenting the contract to the board for approval. The board will have the opportunity to read through the entire contract that has been tentatively agreed upon and debated at that time, and you can take public comment on it if you so desire. So that's the public input to the contracting process.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. Appreciate it.
Mark, and then Bob.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that the Employee Retention Incentive Program be continued through March 31, 2023, and modifications be made as recommended by the staff to pay that incentive on essentially a 3-month basis with proration for employees hired during that period of time. And it's snowing.
I'll second.
Second by Clay. Okay, we got a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Yes.
Okay, Bob.
So I sat here on this board and listened to this, and I have about 70 employees, a very aggressive union. I don't want this to be the precedent set for everybody in Central Washington, and it could well become that. So think about it.
Okay. Right. So I think we're going to take, I think, a hand vote, Maria. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by raising your hand. On the screen.
I should. It's Tiffany, is that a hand? Yes.
Oh, I'm Ann. Tiffany's up there. Oh,
on the
there,
screen.
yeah.
Yeah, she has a hand.
She has a hand.
1, 2, 3. 3 on the screen. And 4, 5, 6 here.
Okay.
6, yes.
Those opposed, please raise your hand.
One, 2, 3, 4, 5.
I think you need to request that Commissioner Gearing clarify. It looks like she did lower her hand, but she should clarify.
I am a yes vote.
Heard that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sorry.
So that and then be 6
6 to 5 negatives. That motion passes. Thank you.
Can I clarify what your motion says, just so everyone's on the same page?
Motion is to extend the Employee Retention Incentive Program through March 31, 2023, and that the program be modified as recommended by the staff to pay that retention incentive on a 3-month basis for a maximum of $1,200.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Authorization to negotiate a contract with the Busco. Richard.
So talked a lot about the framework of what we saw on that framework with the issues with eBusco. So just again, backing up, this came out of a presentation that Ed and I were at in Florida a year ago. We saw their equipment, we talked to eBusco, they committed to give us a proposal for their vehicle as a demonstration site for their 40-foot coach. And they are also working with Lane Transit, which is Eugene, Oregon, for as a demonstration site for their 60-foot coach. And their intention is to open a plant in the United States to start producing these vehicles here at some point, but having a customer in the country showing that the performance is good and they can point to, they think is a significant value. And they have provided pricing that I think indicates that value they want to do. eBusco asked us to consider buying 10 vehicles, and their offer was, originally to us was for 10 vehicles. We told them we only needed 6. To do the Route 21, the service to Chelan-Manson, 6 vehicles is adequate for that, including spares. I got asked after we got back, well, if it's such a great deal, why not get all 10 of them and use them in your Leavenworth service as well? And I think there's some of that conversation. We don't necessarily need them for that. And I think this one of the big questions for the board is we don't need to do this. We have 12 diesel-powered 40-foot coaches that are about 1/3 of the way through the useful life that we purchased in 2018 with local money to do the long-distance commute vehicles. Those vehicles are in good shape. They will last for at least another 6 years, 5 or 6 years. So procurement could wait for several years. That was our original plan. We didn't think batteries were going to advance enough to be able to do anything in Chelan. We made the decision to buy those diesel buses. The opportunity to get this newer technology and to show the value proposition out of the European pricing, I think is some significant value there, as long as also on the energy side of the equation. The calculations we've run say that not only do you dramatically cut your operating costs because of the electric being so much cheaper, if the batteries last 12 years, they'll cover the cost of the bus. That's an astounding statement. Now, I don't know if the batteries are going to last 12 years. eBusco doesn't warranty their batteries for 12 years. They warranty them for 8. Transdev told us they were capitalizing their batteries at 6 years. But even at 6 years, you're going to save a ton of money in the operating expenses for the fuel. I mean, so it still ends up being a cost savings for the organization. It may not be 100% of the cost of the vehicle, which it would be if we can get 12 years out of the batteries. I actually think we may get closer to 12 years. We use our buses less intensely than a lot of people do because we operate high speeds without a lot of stopping and starting. and the way that regen on the charging impacts the batteries. Part of why we had such good results out of our BYDs is that we don't use heavy loads. We don't have, there's a lot of things about it that just fit really well with electrification. So I tend to think we're going to get more life out of the batteries than they're predicting. But I'm not going to tell you that's absolutely true. We've got, both their warranty and the customer we talked to said, no, it's, you may not get that much. And they assumed a shorter life. It still saves money over running the diesel buses. If we do this, we have to do something with the diesel buses. What are we going to do with them? Well, when we decided to electrify this Leavenworth route, which is supposed to happen in March when the additional BYDs show up, we were just going to use these less intensely because we burn through these buses pretty darn fast. 500 miles a day. We hit the mileage limit on the vehicle with 500,000 miles way before 12 years. We typically, and in the last buses, we actually surplused at 10 because we had worn them out and the engines were not something that made sense to redo one more time. So stretching the life of the bus out by using them less intensely was a rational way of trying to get more life out of the vehicle. But if we do this, if we buy the 6 buses for Chelan, we won't need those buses. And so one of the questions is, what are you going to do with them? Well, we could put them on the market and sell them. I don't know what we'll get for them. Used buses have a strange market. In the public sector, everyone expects to grant funds, and so they don't tend to hold value real high. But these are a third of their useful life, and they're a great commuter bus. They would be ideal for someone like the Wenatchee Valley Shuttle to run service to an airport someplace. They're single door, high speed design. That's what they're for. So I think there might be a market. My suspicion is we probably wouldn't get more than $250,000 to $300,000 a copy, which we paid $680,000 for these buses. Is that a good deal? It's a question I just don't really know. The other potential is something the board has said was an interest of theirs, which was running service to Moses Lake or into Grant County. And if we want to do that, that is beyond the range of any electric bus I'm aware of. These would give us a vehicle we could do that with. I don't have operation to do that right now. That might be several years down the road. So those are that's what we would do with the buses. We'd either sell them, surplus them, or we would save them for long distance services that are beyond what a battery bus can do. When the question to me was asked about, well, should we get 10 of these? Well, what would we do with them? We put them in the Leavenworth service. That wouldn't do all the electric buses in Leavenworth. We need more than 4 to do that because 10 doesn't give us a spare ratio. But when I floated this, I got back from some of the operators, why are we going to 35-foot buses on the Leavenworth route? Their buses are full. And so I asked the question and we dug through, and the buses aren't full, but we do have several runs that are running at 26 to 28 people on the bus. The seating capacity of a 35-foot BYD is 26. So we would be full on the buses we're planning to put in the Leavenworth route a couple of times a day. So if we got these, we could assign these vehicles to the high ridership lines. These buses have 44 seats, by the way. I said they're efficient. They're efficient on energy use. They're also incredibly efficient on space. How they've been able to get more seats in the same footprint and still meet the ADA requirements for passageways is darn impressive. They're getting at least 4 more seats in that bus than I've seen any American manufacturer do. And I thought it looked good to me the way they laid it out. So that was impressive. We don't need 44 seats. I mean, we don't get that many people, but we also don't want standees on the highways. That's been one of the criteria we've tried to do. It's why we've had larger buses in those routes for years, is to avoid standees either coming from Chelan or standees coming from Leavenworth on 60 miles an hour. So there's some justification to do that. I think there's a logical reason to do that. It's not a critical need by any means. We have electric vehicles we're going to operate. And if we don't do that, we'll have an urban service. Information item that I forgot to mention during the general manager's report is we were just recommended for funding for 9 more electric buses through the state and a grant at 80%, the Green Transportation Grant. That's for 30-foot BYD. Actually, not a federal funded bus using their advanced technology battery, which they don't sell in the US currently. So we'd be getting a longer range battery as well from BYD. And if we bought these Ebuscos, we would then need no more buses. We would have met our design. We had 19 buses we needed to acquire. We just got funded for 9 of them. We have these 10. We completely replaced the diesel fleet. So by 24, we would have no longer operate diesels in fixed route service, and we would have met our replacement needs. So there's a, yes, there's a legitimate role for that. Don't need to do it. We're going to have those 12 diesel buses that we have to do something with. So that's the first thing I want everyone to be aware of, is that question. That's a choice question for the board to make. We also need to deal with that heat rejection issue on the batteries, and Ebusco has told me that they will address that. So I'm not asking for purchase today. I'm asking for authority to continue to negotiate with them for a proposal. And if we could get something done before the next board meeting that met all the requirements, including talking to our auditor, making sure we can go forward as a sole source, which I think we can, but we need to make sure that's true. Then I would have the authority to do that if I can get that done in the next 30 days. If not, we'll come back to you for a final decision, either direction going forward. They've asked us to try to move that forward because of this, trying to say they have these 2 customers in the US as they're moving forward. That's the time issue. Yeah. It's not that critical to us. It's more critical to them than it is to us, to be honest.
Aaron?
And just to clarify, if it is, if we do the analysis and it is the sole source contract, or there is a special market condition that we can be exempt from the competitive bidding process, it will need to either come before the board as a resolution to approve, or if you have a policy that allows that already, we still have to talk about that policy in open public meeting, and the board has to approve the contract. So just a point of clarification.
So we got to get. So those are the issues that are out there. It's really for me to say, it's the action today would be: do you want to go for do it all? Number 1, do 6 or do 10. I think those are the 3 choice pluses. And then the second part of that is giving a message to Ebusco that yes, we want to work with them, and we've been negotiating the final agreement. It very well may have to come back to the board in January for final action, but it would be a commitment that they can point to and we can point to.
Mark? So number 1, I think there's enough compelling information that I think it's prudent for us to continue moving forward. As part of that, what I'd like to see, I think would be helpful for the rest of the board, is to take a look at doing a total cost of ownership piece, to where we factor in a couple of scenarios. Scenario 1, where we divest of the Gillig diesels,
yeah.
Gillig diesels, and what that looks like now. That may mean making some assumptions, or hopefully it might be something a little bit more concrete than an assumption, but just giving us an idea of a couple of different scenarios and what that total cost, because I think part of the compelling piece of this is the operational savings that we would see over the life of that coach. So I think that would help the board if we get to that point to where we have the concern over the batteries worked out and we come back to the board, that added analysis would be helpful. I think if there's a way that we could work that in.
I definitely think we can. I'd like to show you the cost savings equation with the 6-year life on the batteries as well. I think that's what Transdev was saying they're doing. I mean, I've done enough work with it. I'm confident there is an energy cost savings and there's a vehicle cost savings. I know it doesn't cover the cost of the bus anymore. If we get 12 years out of it, to me, it's a slam dunk question. It would be kind of silly not to do it because the bus is being paid for by the savings.
I got a comment. So you know, the problem that I have, it seems like we're rushing into this e-bus too fast. In my experience in the business world, when you do something new, there's a premium associated with it. You know, it doesn't always work out exactly. There's a lot of unknowns. And now we got two different e-bus models. I kind of like the Southwest Airlines model where they simplify training, maintenance, and everything because they got one plane at 737. Now we're going to be splitting up between two buses, models. You're going to have to train for the maintenance on two different buses. You're going to have to train driving, and I think we're pushing it too far, too fast. I think we should get more service out of the diesel buses that we have so the taxpayers get the benefit instead of selling them short and put this off for a couple of years. That's my input. I think this is still too new. Being the first is not always best, for this European, venture. So that's my 2 cents.
Okay, thanks, Clay. Go ahead, Randy.
I appreciate what you say, Clay, but on the other hand, I think this is a good opportunity, and we're not really the first. They have multiple bus companies over there running them and have been running them. Yeah. Anyway,
well, I'm talking here.
I know. We would be the first here. I understand that. My recommendation would be go for the 10.
Thank you, Randy. Go ahead, Ann, and then Bob.
To add to what Mark said earlier, I think I personally am a pretty visual learner, and it makes it easier for me to make decisions. I really like Mark's idea of showing the financials between the diesel and the Ebusco, but I also would really love to see a comparison with the BYDs we currently have. And then you were also talking about the potential upgrade that we can't currently get in the US, and to kind of see what that comparison looks like as well, so that we can really make a good data-driven decision. From what I've heard today, based on Mark's report from the visit and the information in our packet, it seems like a really straightforward decision for us, but I also would really want to see that stuff. But that doesn't hinder how I feel about moving forward today with this negotiation.
Thank you, Ann. Bob.
Well, I would hope we do rough negotiations, because this is going to be a great big feather in the Ebusco's hat. And I think that it would further our status with the green people about possibly finding additional funds to make this work in a place that we know it will with 3.2 kilowatt hour money. So I think it needs to be looked at for all the reasons discussed.
Yep. Okay, so this is an action item authorizing staff to negotiate a contract with the Ebusco for up to 10 battery electric buses. I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, I've got a motion from Ann and a second from.
Let's
go with Randy.
Bob beat me, but that's fine.
All right, so we got a motion. We got a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Bob Getty seconded.
Yes.
Okay, we're going to go with Bob. I think.
That's who I heard.
Given the comments, I think we're going to go with a hand vote again. So all those in favor, please signify by raising your hand.
6, 7, 8, 9. Tiffany's has her hand up.
Okay.
Okay.
Any opposed? Yeah, I see at least one opposed.
One opposed.
Yes. Okay, that motion passes. Thank you, everyone. Okay, let's go right into staff reports, and let's go with Brenda to talk about the monthly financial report. Okay.
Okay, so it's snowing, yes. Okay, so we've had another good month in sales tax. We received $2,223,000 for November. That was earned in September. Our year to date is $17,785,899. In comparison to 2021 of $15,560,472, the difference is $2.2 million. So our sales tax is still really good. We've received our 5307 grant money of $1.7 million and our $310,000 for the consolidated grant. So our operating budget We are 92% through the year, one more month. Our operating budget for this time period is 19,898,613 with expenditures of 19,103,126. We are under budget by 4%, but do remember that included in that are those expenses that we were not able to actually capitalize. They were budgeted, but moved into the operating. We will have additional dollars for that because we've got the Goodwin Bridge. There's several other projects that will not be able to be, there's not an asset attached to it. So you'll see another large figure in that next for December. We did have a lot of capital expenditures for this month, 485,615. Those projects were the Penny Road Crosswalk for 24,000. The Goodwin Bridge, 171,495. Rock Island Park and Ride improvements, $909,439. Third and Rock Island was 12,369. The Boudry Street or Malaga Alcoa Highway fix was $203,983. And then the marketing van, 61,581. So quite a lot of capital this month. Our cash accounts, our cash with the treasurer is under $820,000. The investments are over 1.2 million, contingency reserves 1.5 million, vehicle reserves 2.1 million. These are all over. FTA reserve, which has been just a standard ongoing thing that we will eventually use, hopefully, is under by the $17,000. Facilities and equipment are $5.4 million over, and then the sales tax reserve is $916,000 or million, 916,000. Okay, that's it. Any questions on that?
Any questions for Brenda? Okay. Thank you very much, Brenda. Those comments, they always throw you off. All right, the monthly human resources report, Julie Shipman. Julie.
Okay. We've been asked by members listening that please speak up. Will do. So in regards to coach operators, we kind of already addressed that we have 82 coach operators currently rostered. And of those, we actually have 77 that are available to work, with 3 of those being in training and 2 on long-term absences. We do have interviews tomorrow for coach operator positions, so that's always exciting. We did fill the training aid position internally. And so that's going to open up one of our dispatch positions, which we have also been recruiting for. We have 4 external and 3 internal applicants for the dispatcher position. The executive assistant with Laura leaving, we have 8 external applicants and 1 internal. And we will be moving forward with hopefully interviewing for that fairly soon.
I can interrupt just for a second. I would like to get a board member to help serve on the interview panel. We're looking at I'm hoping to do something the first week of January towards the end of the week. Mark, you as incoming chair would be the ideal.
Okay. How many are you interviewing?
There are 4.
I think 4 candidates that rose to the top.
Okay.
We have a facilities maintenance worker position open. We've had 14 external applicants. We have we've had 3 interviews, none of them successful at this point. We have a principal planner capital projects position, which is open. We do have 1 external applicant at this point.
Any questions for Julie? Yes, Randy.
I was actually asking about coach operators. Is that what you gave me? The answer, how many you were interviewing?
Oh, so we're actually interviewing 3 tomorrow.
Okay.
And are continuing to do some video testing to hopefully have more applicants. Looking to have another training class start the second or third week in January.
Anything else for Julie? Okay, thanks very much, Julie.
Thank you.
Okay, it is now 5:03. I'm going to close the open session. We're going to go into.
You can actually adjourn the meeting.
Adjourn the meeting?
Because my understanding, there's no action going to be taken after this. So you
Okay.
can adjourn the meeting and then we can convene our closed session.
Okay, so it is 5:03. We're going to go ahead and adjourn the meeting. And thank you all for coming to the meeting. We will be in closed session.
So for those of you that are online, we're going to close this meeting and then you're going to log in with your second link that you've received on your email.
And how long do we want to go into closed session?
You're allowed to say.
Don't have to say because